From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, October 30th. You're listening to the Macrocast. It's Tony Fratto in New York, John Fagan, Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners, our regular partners here on the Macrocast. And we're really excited to have, for I think it's the last show before Election Day. You always get this right. It's like it's 4 days until Election Day. It's 5 days through it. Like Election Day counts. Like you still campaign on Election Day. I don't know why people talk about it like it's an event. And by the way, half the people have voted already anyway. It's like today's Election Day, right?
Yesterday and last week.
Right. I mean, we've been voting and some places even counting.
Yeah,
already.
Texas already surpassed the 2016 total.
Hawaii
last night.
Yeah,
Hawaii
it's amazing.
as well, and other states. We have my partners at Hamilton Place Strategies with us today, Stacy Kerr and Michael Steele. Guys, thanks for joining us to top off the show today and take us into the final the home stretch, the final countdown to the election and election results. I'm going to throw to you guys. Where do we see the race right now? We have some I think so. We have some polls coming out even today, maybe even as we speak.
We're kind of heading into like when a spacecraft is re-entering the atmosphere. We're headed into the blackout period where we won't get meaningful new information really from after today, I don't think. But right now I would say, and Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of the information points to a solid but not blowout victory for the former vice president, with the very narrow possibility that the president, while losing Wisconsin and Michigan, could still win a even narrower electoral college victory while losing the popular vote pretty substantially. And so if I'm the Biden campaign right now, at least based on the public polls, what I'm scared of is the fact that he's not pulling outside the margin of error in public polls in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, and it's entirely possible he wins all of those. These things tend to go kind of all one way or all the other. He could even have a chance in Iowa and perhaps even Texas and Georgia. But I would be looking at playing defense right now to make sure that you lock down Pennsylvania in particular, but also Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina.
One interesting data point someone told me the other day is Bloomberg chose to spend the $100 million in Florida in the hopes that they get Florida. So on election night, that right. Biden's president. Yeah.
Florida counts early. There's some states that can't start counting until the polls close. They're early in absentee ballots. Florida counts early, and while they do have a few counties in Central Time Zone, they're mostly Eastern Time Zone. So yeah, if Biden wins Florida, we should know relatively early, and that's kind of the rosy scenario for having a being confident in the outcome on election night. And I would add that if you get Florida and North Carolina, it's pretty much certain.
Yeah, look, I think it's better to be the Biden campaign than the Trump campaign right now. Yeah. I think there's, Steele, you mentioned the narrowness of this. I actually still see a very, very narrow path for a Trump victory. I see a lot more path for a Biden victory, including an actual big Biden victory, even with all of these polls in the margins, right? So there's some debate, Tony, you mentioned polling, what's coming out, what we're looking at. Some people believe the polls have to be wrong for Trump to win. I actually don't think that's the case. I think if you look at the polls and if everything is right today, there is still a path, very narrow for Trump, and it takes you through that Sun Belt, like Steele mentioned, and right up to your home there, Tony, of Pennsylvania. So I think Pennsylvania is definitely the one to watch. I think both candidates have spent some time there in the last couple of days. One thing that I think is really interesting and maybe a little underreported on, and as it relates to sort of the presidential and the Senate races, if you look at where some of that overlap is and you look at some of this, you would think based on what Steele just told you that the candidates would all be camped out in North Carolina and Pennsylvania. And yet Kamala Harris is going to be in Texas. Biden's going to Iowa. Biden's been in Georgia. What do those three states have in common?
Yeah, they're both in Minnesota today, which is both campaigns are in Minnesota today.
They're doing a Midwest swing. But what I thought was interesting about Iowa, Texas, and Georgia is they have overlapping Senate races. And if you're the Biden campaign and you've got more paths to victory, that means you've got more chances to send a candidate in and try to bring those Senate races along as well. So some interesting dynamics that
I think that's right. I think the question there is whether they're being smart in trying to spread the field, help the Senate candidates because they're confident of victory and want a majority in the Senate as well, or whether this is the equivalent of Hillary Clinton going to Arizona in the closing days of 2016 and never visiting Wisconsin. Right? Are they trying to spread the field rather than shoring up their own back 40, which would be smarter? And that's, I think that's the worry that everyone who's supporting the former vice president has, is that they're falling for the appearance of an opportunity to expand the field while not locking down, the keystone to everything, which, as Stacy correctly said, is Pennsylvania. I mean, if you're the Biden campaign, I don't know whether he ever leaves Scranton.
Yeah, he will. I'd say that they are closing the campaign. Biden will be closing the campaign in Pennsylvania, doing a full state tour. And I think literally every big Biden name, including Kamala Harris, including I think the Obamas and others, will be in Pennsylvania in the last 48 hours of the campaign. So it looks like they're doing that. I haven't seen the Trump schedule yet, whether he'll be doing the same. But you're right, and it is it's the Keystone State. It is what did James Carville call it? Philadelphia and Pittsburgh separated by Alabama. It's rural, it's urban, it's industrial, it's ag. It's Great Lakes and it's Appalachia and it's East Coast and it's Midwest, right? It's got it's that really interesting state. I think Democrats have a leg up. We got I think something like 700,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. So theoretically, a high turnout should help them. It also has the opportunity to create the greatest confusion on election day and the ensuing days because of its lack of experience with mass mail-in ballots, a clumsy ballot itself, requiring 2 envelopes and correct signatures and sealing, and they do not start counting until November 3rd. And then there have been, including a Supreme Court case over the past week determining how and when those counts are allowed to happen. When ballots are received, are they allowed to be counted? So it is, if you're looking for, the most likely locus of chaos in this election, it's probably Pennsylvania. So we'll see. And nobody knows. I mean, to Stacy's point, Biden has been leading in statewide polling. He has mostly been outside the margin of error in Pennsylvania. We'll see. I think there are a couple of Pennsylvania polls coming today, and we'll see whether there's been any tightening at all. But
Tony,
yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
Tony, the other thing that I would that you mentioned the time of counting and when these states begin counting, and one of our HPS researchers, Johnny Lowe, and I took a look at the top 12 states, and based on the Cook report for Battleground, and 5 of those top 12 states count early, right? Start counting early. Yep. Those include Florida and Texas
and North Carolina,
right? Yep. So, and North Carolina.
Yep.
If we don't, there is also a scenario. It may feel unlikely, but there is a scenario where Florida or Texas goes, and it's sort of the race is done, right? Yeah. Certainly if Texas goes, right?
Yeah, let's be clear. Yeah, Texas. I mean, if Texas goes, we're talking about a whole different kind of.
That's a blowout. That's a Reagan-ish.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But Tony, go ahead, Steele.
Go ahead, Stacy. I was just going to say, Tony, to your point, the Real Clear average of polls in Pennsylvania is now at 4.3 Biden victory. Biden victory by 4.3 percentage.
National polling.
No, this is the Pennsylvania.
That's the average on the ground.
Okay. Yeah.
Average of the Pennsylvania polls is 4.3. That is outside the margin by a point, and also down from where it's down a full point from where it was a week ago. So whether you call it natural tightening or the president surging as a result of the reasonably good debate performance or whatever it is, but it is tightened up a little bit in the last week, and it is hovering barely outside the margin of error right now.
You know, I think we've said it time and time again on this podcast. This race really hasn't moved. I personally think what we see tightening is actually people voting. I'm not sure it's actually tightening. There's not enough undecided voters for this to really be starting to swing or close as we have seen in other types of elections. We're just getting closer to actually people taking action and us knowing the results of that. But here's the other thing that I think is a really interesting dynamic to watch. So Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, those are states where Republican turnout, and we know Republicans are going to turn out their voters. I think that's been a quiet story of this election, that both sides are investing tons of resources in doing it. But there's a likely scenario where Trump will be ahead when the polls close in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And we could see major, like maybe dozens of points swing when those states then the next day that night start counting the absentee and the early ballots. So there's going to be some dynamics where what we see on election day can look very different a few days later when all those votes are counted.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of people are looking at North Carolina and Florida to try and, if you're going to get an election night result, then that's probably going to be your indicators. I also think Tony brought up earlier the fact that both campaigns are in Minnesota today, which, Minnesota is the one that got away for the Trump campaign in 2016. They broke the rest of the blue wall states. They lost Minnesota by, I think, fewer than 10,000 votes. That's always been their answer when you ask where they can expand the field in 2020. And so I think it's probably smart for the Biden campaign to be there as well, but it does make it look as though they have some degree of uncertainty about rebuilding the blue wall that collapsed so dramatically in 2016.
All right, so that's where we are on the presidential. What about the Senate? We feel pretty confident that there are a few states that are Republicans are definitely going to suffer some real losses. The most likely, I think, Cory Gardner in Colorado, probably Susan Collins in Maine.
Martha McSally out in Arizona.
McSally in Arizona is probably the next most likely to lose. What are your thoughts on those three races, and then the other big races? Obviously, the two races in Georgia, North Carolina. What am I missing? Well,
Iowa,
Kansas, Alaska,
potentially even Kansas and Alaska. Yeah, I mean, I think Republicans
Montana
have been quietly a little more confident over the past week. And I'm not saying that it's going to be a good night, but it may not be as bad a night as we thought a week or so ago.
For Republicans.
Republicans are growing a little more confident about their Senate prospects over the past week. I think Ernst is closing strong in Iowa. Cunningham is not able to pull away in North Carolina, in part because of his texting, trysting scandal.
Scandals.
They're just the president tightening a little bit helps in Arizona, helps McSally. I'm not predicting a great night for Republicans, but I think if you had asked me a week ago, I would have said that the majority in the Senate was probably gone. Right now, I'm a little more 50-50.
Wow, Steele, a hot take. I think I certainly think there's just too many seats on the board. It becomes a numbers game, and I think if you look at all those seats in the middle that we mentioned, and then you put, Tony, like you say, sort of wild going on in Alaska, open seat in Kansas, again, back to a perhaps unlikely, but is this going to be the year where Texas tips? And we see that. I still see, a 2 to 3 seat pickup for Democrats in the Senate.
Which ones do you think are most likely, Stace? After those, I do think those three that we just mentioned are the most likely. Which one or two after that would you put in the likely?
Because remember this, Doug Jones is going to lose in Alabama. So you need one or two more.
Two more.
Yep. I actually think Montana could go. I think, remember.
That is the most expensive, on a per capita basis, the most expensive election in the history of mankind.
And
right?
that's saying something this year.
Yeah.
And speaking of spending, we haven't even seen the end of it, you guys. We're going to probably see a double runoff down in Georgia in January. Exactly that's going to be probably another $100 to $200 million dropped in there, especially, and certainly control of the Senate, which way it goes.
Yeah. If that's for control of the Senate.
Yeah, right. We're going to. Yeah. But also remember, the map for Senate Republicans doesn't get much better in 2022. So if you're talking, about two seats versus three seats, or a bigger majority in the Senate, that matters. So people are going to take these resources, which seem to be unlimited this year, and really pump them into Georgia. Really interesting Senate debate down in Georgia this week. Did you guys see that? Where John Ossoff sort of had one of these breakout moments where people that are teaching campaign politics will be playing that clip, I think, where he said, Senator, not only are you a crook, you've jeopardized the health of the people in your state. And his delivery on it was just really, really strong, causing Senator Perdue to cancel his debate, the final debate this weekend, and instead go to a rally with Trump.
Yeah,
so I think what he's seeing is
excuse he has, but it is not a good look for Senator Perdue. And that was the stronger of the two Georgia Senate races. I mean, it was certain that the Loeffler race was going to go to a runoff. And now it seems pretty certain that the Perdue race will also go into a runoff until January 5th.
Yeah. I thought the other point, just sort of anecdotally, I saw this week up in Maine, Senator Susan Collins came out and said systemic racism does not exist in the state of Maine. And I do think that still, race is the issue that's permeating through all of these races this year. And I saw her say that, and I sort of scratched my head.
The issue in all honesty, I mean, it's a pretty homogeneously white state, and not that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying I don't know. I wonder.
Sure, I think to think that a United States senator would not think that would be on the mind of voters. I think it's a miscalculation. So.
We'll see. I spent a little time in Maine and have supported Senator Collins, and but it's a weird state, and we'll see what happens up there. I don't know. It's a very.
It's also, for fans of political trivia, it's also one of the two states that splits its electoral votes by congressional district. So, if we get into one of these scenarios where, say, the president wins everything else but loses Wisconsin, Michigan, and Arizona, and we're suddenly looking at a tie unless he's managed to hold on to that Maine 2nd district or the first the district in Nebraska, or all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, fun.
Yeah, and then the final thing to watch on the Senate, I would just say, is again, we're not. It would be hard to predict that these things are going to happen, but if you still saw South Carolina go or Texas go, two big ifs, I think that would signal that that's going to be a big win across the board for Democrats.
But we actually didn't mention Lindsey Graham in that race. He's in trouble still, right? I mean, this is going to be an election day.
Yeah. I mean, Jamie Harrison, a DNC official who's running against him, who's a great guy, has raised an eye-popping sum of money, really extraordinary sum of money. And, for a state that has 3.5 million people, I personally think that he will do as well as any candidate could do in South Carolina right now. I do think he'll fall short. I think that South Carolina is on the same trajectory as Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia, with a large African-American population and a lot of college-educated Yankees moving in. But it's not there yet.
And it's not Texas in the demographics yet.
No,
and the other thing I think in South Carolina that, we predicted, and I think we're probably seeing a slight bump is that the confirmation, the Supreme Court confirmation actually helped Senator Graham down there, and that might have been just enough. But to
Trump has a
Steele's
pretty
point,
big
I think
lead in South Carolina too. Graham will have to lose a ton of Trump votes to not pull this thing out.
Yeah, I think I think you'll see big splits there for sure, because as Steele said, not only is Jamie Harrison a wonderful person, he's an outstanding candidate. I mean, he has done a great job in this race, and he is one to watch. Yeah, he has absolutely a future in national politics and the importance of South Carolina.
You watch him campaign and you hear him in interviews. He's really good at this. He's pretty talented, and so I agree with that. Let's take a break here. We'll come back and talk about predictions for the House, Senate, and President. You're listening to the Macrocast.
On the first Friday of every month, HPS analyzes the latest jobs and labor market data in a digestible format. Sign up for our reports at hamiltonplacestrategies.com or on Twitter at HPS Insight.
And we're back on the Macrocast. Steele, talk to us about the House.
Republicans started the cycle with a decent chance to pick up some seats. There are 16, 17 Democrats sitting in districts that the president won in 2016, often strongly. But I think the president has made it impossible for them to take advantage of those opportunities and the pandemic. If we were looking at the president in the position where he was in January with a strong economy, Supreme Court, et cetera, I think we net out probably down low single digits for Republicans in the House.
Yeah, I certainly think we'll see Democrats grow their majority in the House. I think, to me, more interestingly than whether or not they will hold, it's where they will pick up seats. And I think we're likely to see something that we saw under the Obama administration, where they picked up seats in districts you might say they had no business winning. And that's going to be important to watch as you think about a governing agenda. It's going to be important to watch as you think about people who are willing to vote for more stimulus money. If you think about, where are the votes? You look back at 2008, 2009, cap and trade bill. Some of those folks that then lost in the midterm in 2010 attribute it to making what they, came to be bad votes on big bills. So all these things are really connected to what you would see from an agenda and how that gets passed under a Biden administration as well.
Senate, what do you guys final predictions on the Senate?
You got mine. I see a couple seats pick up.
Plus,
for Democrats.
What's the your prediction is Democrats get enough to take control of the Senate?
Yes.
Okay, Steele.
It's tick tight, but they fall just short pending the Georgia runoffs.
So that would be the most fun for just sheer drama, right? We should be
sure.
Yeah,
we can ruin every political junkie's holiday season along the way.
Right, exactly. And then Steele, president.
I'm going to go with the likeliest outcome being a solid but not blowout Biden victory.
Stace.
I'm going to go Biden. I'm going to go Biden with the larger than expected victory.
And when do we know? For the markets, honestly, I think that's more important than who wins.
Sure. I mean, if my prediction comes true, we will. That will mean that we know, that we know on election night or late or early the next morning.
Yeah. You think so too, Still, that we know pretty soon?
I hope so. I mean, if I want to see Florida and North Carolina come in pretty early, and I don't want to see buses picking up staffers in front of the RNC headed for Philadelphia and Pittsburgh on the morning of November 4th, and that's the scenario that worries me. And I think you guys are the experts, but I think that's the scenario that really scares markets.
I think that's absolutely right on the money. The market participants that we talk to are far more focused on that potential for a disputed, drawn out, and disorderly process to name the victor, not just in the presidential race, but into the pivotal Senate races as well. And that kind of, we saw yesterday Walmart announced that they were pulling guns and ammo off the shelves in surplus of caution, citing the potential for civil unrest around the election. And that's just, another one of those 2020 moments. If you told me 5 years ago that where it's
right.
That really is the locus of concern for market participants. And, certainly there are relatively large deltas in terms of the policy outlook when you go through the various permutations of who wins what, the presidency and the Senate, for instance, flipping different ways. But the end all be all for the risk around this election really is that disputed and disorderly post-election scenario.
Don't make us wait for your predictions, Tony.
You may have to wait.
Till the end of the podcast.
No, I'll give it to you now. I do think Biden. I do think Biden pulls it off. I think the polling is better this time. Of course, it is within the margin. So I don't think even if Trump wins, you won't hear me whacking the polls because all of those states that we mentioned, as you both noted, are within margins of error. Now, like, margins of error are real things. They're not they're not fake things. They're real. And so if those states tilt Trump, then then you can see it. I will tell you, in a lot of these states, though, you think about how campaigns signal. If you don't believe in polls, campaigns signal things to you. What the campaigns are signaling to me, both in terms of where they're going to campaign, but also the Republicans' efforts for a couple months now have been to limit turnout. You can call it suppression or whatever you want to call it, but there've been efforts to limit turnout. Any efforts that state legislatures or governors have done to expand voting, either by mail, by increasing precincts, by having drop-off locations, curbside voting. All of these things have been challenged by Republicans. That tells me that Republicans are most worried about turnout. And I see turnout off the charts. We talked about earlier about Hawaii and Texas. A lot of states are going to exceed not just 2016, but are going to exceed or approach, historic levels of voting. So we talked about Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania is a state with, like I said, 700,000 more registered Democrats. Like, the pool of voters, if turnout goes up, is much more likely. So people look at polls and they say, well, yeah, it's within the margin on likely voters, but it's outside the margin on registered voters. Well, the greater turnout you have, the closer you get to a lot, where your prediction looks closer to what registered voters are saying, not likely voters. We'll see, but that's my sense. I think Biden pulls it out. I think the Senate is going to be real. I agree with both of you. Or maybe I agree with Steele on this. I think it's going to be tight. If you'd asked me a week ago, it didn't look good for Joni Ernst. But she seems to have recovered her footing there. And so I think we're looking at a really tight Senate, and it is going to come down to those two Georgia seats. I think we are going to see that. And, in the House, they're going to, Republicans are going to lose seats in the House. Here's my prediction.
It sounds like we all agree that turnout is the October surprise.
We've never seen anything like that, not in our lifetimes, right? We haven't seen anything like this, and so but look, I'm pro voters, right? I want high turnout. If it was up to me alone, I'd say I'd be in favor of mandatory voting. I like to see high turnout. I always want to see high turnout and let the parties go fight it out with all the voters, not like narrow subsets of voters. I'm in favor of it. I hope this steps up voting for the future as well. By the way, I think it's better for both parties to have increased turnout. And when I say better for the parties, is increased turnout is a moderating influence on the party. Right? The problem that we have, the polarization of the parties has been a phenomenon that has gone along with lower turnout. So you have the most activated voters on both sides, whether conservatives or liberals, progressives, and the Democratic Party, who tend to dominate the parties. The higher turnout you have, the more you get people in the great center. And so I think of it as a moderating influence. And that's why I think we should all be in favor. I mean, unless you are one of the purists and want to see that.
Well, as Brendan noted, that Texas surpassing the 2016 numbers, that they estimate 10% of those people didn't vote in 2016 or have never voted. So we're definitely adding people to the process.
For sure.
Yeah, and I just in defense of traditional Republicans, the Trump universe is narrower than the universe that Republicans can appeal to, right? He's given up on college-educated women, suburban areas that used to be areas of strength for the Republican Party. He's given up on substantial outreach to African Americans, to Latinos. A lot of the things that Republicans have tried to do to expand the tent, he's pulled back on. And so I hope, if he is not reelected or when he completes his second term in office, that we can get back to a more open and aspirational Republican Party, because the coalition that he put together, it may be able to win one more time. I mean, last time it was pulling an inside straight. This time it takes, a lottery victory, winning the lottery to do it one more time. But it is not a coalition that can win in 2024 and going forward.
Yeah, we see that, as we talked about already. Nobody's talking about Virginia today, right? As I was, making my career in this business, Virginia was the
swing state.
Colorado was a solid Republican state. Arizona was a solid Republican state.
Yeah.
We are not competitive on a statewide level in California. You can't have a national political party that is not competitive in the largest state in the union.
Ohio looked like it was going that direction, and it'll be interesting to see if it continues on that trajectory after this election. So
to Steele's point, that's the future. These states are going to be at best purple, and a party that writes off purple states and pushes them into blue doesn't have much of a future. So it's going to evolve. Like, the Republican Party is going to evolve. It's going to happen sooner or it's going to happen later. But, otherwise with only two parties, this is what happens to all the parties. They tend to, they end up evolving, and they start stretching into the middle in order to be competitive again. So, we'll see. But this is, if Trump is able to pull this off, it's going to happen. It'll happen later rather than sooner. Guys, we're gonna. I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. Hopefully, we're not back here like middle of next week with a special edition, right?
I hope we're back next week, having some where we can
reflecting.
Where we could tell our markets audience what to expect from a policy standpoint from what will be the presumed next administration. I hope it's a closed question, not an open question, when we're back next week.
Well, governing won't be easy regardless of what these scenarios are.
Agreed.
And if Pennsylvania is not resolved, at least we'll be able to get cheesesteaks.
That's true. But let me tell you, as a Pennsylvanian, Pennsylvanians don't want, busloads of Pennsylvania either right now. Hey, let's take a break and we'll come back and take a look at some of the fresh econ data and what we're looking at next week. You're listening to the Macrocast.
Have you heard the news? The HPS Macrocast is expanding into the HPS podcast channel, which offers our listeners access to all of Hamilton Place Strategy's podcast shows in one convenient place. The HPS podcast channel is home to all of our new and past podcast episodes on your favorite podcast streaming services: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google, and more. If you're already subscribed to the HPS Macrocast, do nothing. If you aren't, subscribe now to have weekly HPS Macrocast episodes and the latest from HPS Insights delivered straight to your podcast streaming service. To learn more about our podcasts and other original content, visit hamiltonplacestrategies.com/insights.
I'm back on the Macrocast. Guys, we had it's not for an election season. If you're the incumbent party, we have COVID cases way up. We have the markets down this week. We also had a lot of earnings and some data. How are you guys seeing it?
Yeah, it's been a rocky week in the markets, that's for sure. We've seen a resurgence of COVID over in Europe, really weighing on stocks over there, and that's had a spillover into the U.S. The renewed lockdowns in some of the European capitals, very worrisome, and that's being mirrored in the rising numbers here in the U.S. and the fears about some increased restrictions, or just, as we pointed out before, just human behavior as the sense of risk and intensifies here, given that we're seeing it all on the news play out. So that's certainly been a part of it, part of the downside this week. And the other aspect, and we've already referenced, obviously, political uncertainty that has basically earlier in the month there was a sense that Biden was stretching out his lead, and that the blue wave, relatively clear-cut scenario was something that you could increasingly count on. But that's ebbed to a great extent here, and political nerves have come back to the fore. And alongside all of that, earnings have been pretty muddy. The theme for third quarter earnings season so far has really been that consistent level, very high levels of upside surprises on the headline earnings and sales figures really haven't done much to support the stocks. And that's beyond the other macro headwinds that we've mentioned. There really is a sense among management that the future quarters remain very, very cloudy. They could get away with that in the second quarter earnings season, topping expectations and not giving much guidance. But it's turned a little bit more concerning here, particularly with stocks not that far from all-time highs. So the S&P 500 is down about 5% this week, but not less than 10% off record highs.
Yeah, analysts used to be looking at 2020 numbers didn't matter, but you were looking at normalized 2021, and I think it's now becoming apparent that 21's going to be very similar to 20. So you're talking about 2022 numbers.
Yeah, and the tech giants that came out overnight, we had Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Facebook come out overnight, and only Google was really on the positive, surprising side of things for impressing analysts. Mm-hmm. And so those heavy hitters didn't knock it out of the park and haven't really salvaged their earnings season. It's been a little nuanced. We haven't really seen the safe haven trade support the dollar like we typically see. The dollar is still hovering around its recent lows, and unhelpfully for a lot of funds that use treasuries as the cushion for during risk off times. Treasuries haven't really rallied here. They've been sort of stuck. So it's been, and while this is happening, oil prices have dropped below their trading range. So this has been a not so pretty week for the markets, and coming into elections, people are really bracing for that drawn out scenario of uncertainty that persists.
But also, you got to keep in mind, we were fairly close to highs, a couple of weeks ago. So it's not like, the market's down 7-8%, not like it's down 30%.
Yeah.
Fortunately, for Congress, there's not enough pain in the markets to get them to pass a bill.
For each of those companies, especially Amazon and look, companies like Amazon, Target, Walmart, Apple. It's sort of like the big publicly traded retail companies that have been they've been the winners. Retail has been strong. They were essentially pass-throughs for a lot of the fiscal stimulus, right? I mean, the $1,200 checks, the $600 a week unemployment insurance gave people a lot of money to spend. They spent it in the places that were open and available and can deliver to their door. And those were those companies. So those companies all did really well. Are you sensing that? Are we seeing anything in retail sales that should give us pause that has abated for them?
As of yet, the data still looks pretty sturdy. And going into the holiday season, we had a very interesting conversation. Our last Macrocast, John Dick coming in with some good insights on that, about how they're seeing consumers with some headroom in their credit card on their credit card balances that can maybe tide them over through the holiday season. But it is a situation where economists and market participants alike are sort of, they've got their antenna up for that number that comes out that maybe crystallizes some of these downside economic risks, and that downside risk may be driven home in next week's non-farm payrolls report. We're not sure about it, but that's going to be a really big deal.
Because this morning we got personal income and spending, and they surprised a little bit to the upside. So personal income was up 0.9%, and that was with decreases in government social benefits, which we knew was happening. But the surprise was actually people making more compensation, which is a good sign. But that was September. Now we're getting into October and November, and it's getting colder, and COVID cases are spiking, and restaurants start to close, and you're a little less comfortable going out shopping. So the winter is what is a little scary, and it's really, that's where we need the bridge to get us, the fiscal bridge to get us to the spring, and hopefully
seems like it. Yeah, and to John's point, though, it may whether I think we do need the fiscal bridge, but it's if you're a market participant and you're looking at Europe right now, and we seem to be 3 weeks or a month behind Europe.
Yeah, it's just math. I mean, we're back to 100,000 a day. It's just going to keep going because we're not doing anything to slow it down.
Yeah.
And this is coming as the realism is setting in about the timeline for vaccine approval and distribution. There was a sense over the summer that perhaps we would have a vaccine by now, or in the coming months. We may still have that. But realism has that realistic timeline for distribution and widespread uptake on the vaccine. I think that's beginning to permeate the consciousness of the markets. And
yesterday, Dr. Fauci said that you're probably going to have to wear masks in the third and fourth quarter of 2021. And even a few weeks ago, he was a little more optimistic that maybe by the summertime we could be back to semi-normal. So.
Well, guys, look, we're going to have between the jobs report and the election, a lot to talk about next week. So we'll be ready for that on the Macrocast next Friday. Great show today.
Jobs Friday.
What's that?
Next Friday is Jobs Friday.
Jobs Friday, yeah, it's big. The mother of all jobs reports. It is going to be a pretty important jobs report, I think. So we'll get a chance to dive in deep. We'll have Matt McDonald with us as always on Jobs Day. But have a great weekend. It's Halloween weekend. If you got kids, share good pictures on Instagram. I'll be looking for them. And but avoid gatherings. And we'll see you next week. You're listening to the Macrocast.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.